Hello, everyone. Michael here with an update on the Ashes of the Chimera crowdfunding campaign. We are now 3 days into it, trying to raise $25,000, and I think we're off to a pretty strong start. We've raised 17% of our budget already. It's about $4,300 out of the total of 25,000 we're trying to raise. Still, this is going to be an uphill battle, and we always knew it would be. So there's still ways to go. So I don't want to back off or slack off or anything. I'm going to keep pushing and plowing ahead through these next few weeks, trying to raise that additional 20,000 or so. If we get to 80%, which is about $20,000, that's still enough for the campaign to be successful. So we want to aim for at least that, but we're going to try and go the whole way, obviously. Now, I'm going to talk briefly, though, about something that's honestly caught me a little bit off guard. Most crowdfunding platforms will take a small percentage off the back end, usually 8, 15%. I think it's closer to 11. And that makes perfect sense because the platform has to make money somehow. And the risk to them, of course, is that any campaign that fails, they get nothing because all the pledges are refunded or never charged in the first place. Seed and Spark used to work that way back when we did our original campaign with them, but they recently changed it to an optional tipping system where the platform is totally free, but it relies on supporters choosing to cover the prospective fees if they choose to. Unfortunately, they aren't as clear about this in their language as I think they could be and frankly should be. When I actually tried going through the process myself yesterday, I found an unexplained tip, is what it literally said, of 25%. And that's a lot, especially if you're giving $200 or $500 or more, and there was no obvious way to change it. Well, it turns out if you scroll down, you find the option to change it or even eliminate it entirely. So you don't have to tip. But they don't make that obvious. I didn't think initially to do that, to scroll down, and I imagine a lot of people won't either. I can't imagine what someone thinks when they decide to risk $500 and they see $125 attached without explanation. Even if they scroll down and they find that, it just seems like a bad first impression. Imagine if someone is awesome and gallant enough to want to contribute $1,000 or $5,000, and those folks exist. And they suddenly just see this $1,200 tip on there. I mean, I had a visceral reaction looking at that. Maybe partly because the word tip is so loaded these days. But honestly, if I'd known that this is the way they present it, I think I would have gone with Kickstarter. Crowdfunding platforms are pretty much interchangeable these days, except for these small, unique things. Kickstarter has brand recognition. Indiegogo lets you do flexible goals. Seed and Spark is geared specifically toward filmmakers. And that means that there are people trolling the site just looking for projects to donate to. And so that was kind of why we stuck with Seed and Spark again, plus the fact that it went so well the first time. Not everyone knows this, but we tried using Indiegogo initially about 5 months before we did our first Seed and Spark campaign years ago, and we didn't make it. But we did make it when we went to Seed and Spark. So we stuck with them again this time. The thing that really bugs me, though, is that the tips are not refundable, at least not automatically. A rep told me yesterday that if contributors feel they were confused or tipped in error, they can ask for a refund on the tip and it'll be granted on an individual basis. Simple enough, right? But otherwise, if the campaign doesn't reach its goal, those tips are not refunded. The pledges aren't charged at all, which is good and right, I think. But I don't like the tips being charged initially and being non-refundable. And I know I'm not supposed to talk about the possibility of failure during an active campaign, but I have to think about that, from a business standpoint. I have to think about the possibility, the cost of, not making it. And I went into this with the honest belief that if we did not make our goal, that the only loser would be me. This tipping system looks to kind of put the risk on the contributor, which is 100% not the way I wanted to do this. But it is what it is. That's how the platform works. That's how they make their money. If you're not wanting to tip, just scroll down and choose not to tip. Or if you want to tip more reasonably than I think a rather absurd 25%, scroll down and change it to something like 8 or 11%. That makes a lot more sense. And at any rate, here we are 3 days into a campaign to get a really fantastic project off the ground. and almost 20% funded. Again, that's a great start. Is it enough momentum to carry us through the rest of the way? Well, that remains to be seen, because when it comes down to it, it's down to folks like you to help us get this movie made. Could we do this, on basically nothing, just hobbyists, giving up our weekends and so on? I don't think most of us can anymore, though, as we get older. There's just too much in life that makes it hard to do that. But we still want to make these movies because well, we still have a passion for this. Film industry has lost a lot of that passion in the last 15, 20 years. I don't know, maybe back in the 90s when I was growing up, maybe that's what all the adults were saying then. And I'm just the old man, looking back and not liking how everything's changed. But I genuinely think we've lost something in our entertainment in the last 15 or 20 years. The shows are so much about stringing you along and burning hours, keeping you curious about some mystery that they never really solve. The content is edgier and edgier just for the sake of it. And it just seems like there's not a lot of meaningful entertainment anymore. And that's exactly what I don't want to do with the Chimera series. Watching Voyage again, it's been a couple of years since it was made, and it's interesting how hindsight affects you. I think we were a little too obscure and coy with some of the backstory and some various items on it. So Ashes is going to be deliberately quite a bit more upfront on a lot of things and much more focused on every scene moving things forward. In fact, there was a lot of stuff I wanted to include, but I just had to chop it at the script level because it was too much stuff, too many ideas. You have to get it down to that lean level where everything you need is there and everything is just very efficient, very tight. So I guess with Chimera, what I'm trying to do is strike that balance between modern and old fashioned, because I'm not going to just go back and make a movie out of the 80s and 90s. You can't really do that. You can't really go back. It's always just an imitation of an earlier time. What I want to do is more of, well, what like Indiana Jones did. You take an older idea, the Old Republic serials, and you do today's version of it. In this case, we're taking more of like the old sailing ship movies and the old submarine movies, and we're doing those in space, essentially. If you're inspired by some of the same things that I am, I hope you'll consider taking a look at our Seed and Spark page and contributing to seeing a homegrown, homemade sci-fi movie made here in Southern Colorado. All we want to do is create a fine entertainment without any kind of agenda at all, except to tell a great story. Meanwhile, I'm also working on novel versions of the films. I wasn't sure I was going to do that initially, but a couple of people reached out to me and suggested it. And I've got almost 40,000 words of the first one already. And yeah, I think I'm going to finish those, whether I'm able to make the movies or not. Thank you to all of you who have watched this whole long ramble here. I'll probably have to cut some bits out of it. Lauren, I love you and are forever grateful for all of your support. And we're very grateful that we've managed to make even one movie at all. It's so hard just to make one. But God willing, we're going to try to make two more here. So thanks for watching. Have a great weekend, and may God bless all of your endeavors. Thanks and have a good night.